The deep space around Andromeda Station looked calm that morning, with only the usual traffic of cargo ships and patrol vessels moving between the stars. Captain Jake Morrison sat in his command chair aboard the USS Venture, watching the main screen show nothing but empty space and distant suns. He had been running these routine patrols for 3 months now, and honestly, he was getting bored. The Venture was not the biggest ship in the human fleet, but she was fast and well-armed. Her crew of 42 people had been together for 2 years, and they worked like a single mind. Morrison trusted every one of them with his life, which was good, because out here in the dark between worlds, they only had each other. Lieutenant Amy Carter sat at her communications station, her fingers dancing over the controls as she monitored the usual chatter between ships and stations. She was young, maybe 25, with bright eyes and a quick mind that could crack any code the galaxy threw at her. Morrison had handpicked her for this mission because she was the best communications officer he had ever worked with. The morning was quiet until Amy suddenly sat up straight in her chair. Her face went pale as she pressed her earpiece closer to her ear. Something was wrong. Morrison could tell by the way her shoulders tensed and her breathing changed. "Captain," Amy said, her voice barely above a whisper, "I'm picking up something strange on the encrypted channels." Morrison stood up and walked over to her station. The Venture had some of the best listening equipment that human technology could build, gear that could hear conversations from halfway across a solar system if you knew where to look. Amy had been using it to keep track of normal space traffic, but now she had found something else. "What kind of strange?" Morrison asked. Amy's fingers flew over her controls, adjusting frequencies and cleaning up the signal. "It's coming from the Council's secure military channel, the one they use for their most secret communications." Morrison felt his blood run cold. The Galactic Council was supposed to be humanity's ally now. After years of proving themselves worthy, humans had finally been accepted as full members of the galactic community just 6 months ago. There should be no reason for the Council to be hiding anything from them. "Can you decode it?" Morrison asked. Amy nodded and began working her magic with the encryption. Her hands moved so fast, they were almost a blur as she ran the signal through every decoding program the ship had. Minutes passed in tense silence while the rest of the bridge crew watched and waited. Finally, Amy's face went white as snow. She looked up at Morrison with fear in her eyes. "Captain, you need to hear this," she said. Morrison put on a headset and listened as Amy played back the decoded transmission. The voice that came through was cold and mechanical, speaking in the common galactic language that all species used. "For official business, Operation Cleanse is approved for implementation. Target species, human. Estimated population for elimination, 4.7 billion across all colonies. Primary strike locations confirmed as Earth, Mars, Luna Base, and 17 outer rim settlements. Biological weapons are ready for deployment. Ground forces will coordinate with orbital bombardment to ensure complete species termination." Morrison pulled off the headset and stared at Amy. His hands were shaking. He had heard every word clearly, but his mind refused to accept what it meant. The Galactic Council, the same organization that had welcomed humanity into the galactic community, was planning to kill every human being in the universe. "Are you sure this is real?" Morrison asked. Could it be some kind of mistake or fake transmission? Amy ran the signal through every verification program she had. She checked the source codes, the encryption patterns, and the transmission signatures. Everything matched the Council's official secure channels. "It's real, Captain," Amy said. This came directly from the Council's military command center on Zephyr Prime. The transmission codes matched their highest security protocols. Morrison called his second-in-command, Commander Pete Sullivan, to the bridge. Pete was a big man with graying hair, who had served in space for 20 years. He had seen wars and peace treaties, alien first contacts, and diplomatic disasters. Nothing surprised him anymore, or so Morrison had thought. When Pete heard the transmission, his face went through the same changes that Morrison's had. Disbelief, then shock, then cold anger. "How long do we have?" Pete asked. Amy had been working on that question while Morrison called Pete to the bridge. She had found more fragments of the transmission, pieces that talked about timing and coordination. 3 weeks, Amy said. They're planning to start Operation Cleanse in 3 weeks, during the Council's annual Peace Summit. They want humanity to be celebrating their membership in the galactic community when the attacks begin. Morrison sat down heavily in his chair. The Council had been planning this for months, maybe years. All those friendly meetings and diplomatic dinners had been a lie. While human ambassadors thought they were building friendships with alien species, those same aliens were planning humanity's complete destruction. "Why?" Pete asked. "Why would they want to kill us all?" "We've never threatened them. We've shared our technology, helped with their problems, followed all the rules." Morrison had been wondering the same thing. Humans had worked so hard to prove they belonged in the galactic community. They had given up some of their best technology, helped weaker species defend themselves, and always tried to solve problems with words instead of weapons. Amy found part of the answer in another fragment of the transmission. This one included what looked like a planning document, full of analysis and projections. "They're afraid of us," Amy said as she read through the decoded text. "The report says humans reproduce too quickly and adapt too fast. They think we'll eventually take over the galaxy if they don't stop us now." Morrison read the document over Amy's shoulder. The Council's analysis was detailed and thorough. They had studied human behavior, human technology, and human population growth. They had concluded that humanity represented what they called an uncontrolled variable in their carefully managed galactic order. The report talked about human emotions as a weakness that made humans unpredictable in battle. It mentioned human innovation as a threat to established trade patterns. Most disturbing of all, it described human compassion and willingness to help other species as a dangerous influence that might inspire rebellion among the Council's more oppressed number worlds. Morrison realized that everything he thought made humanity good and worthy of galactic citizenship was exactly what the Council feared most. Humans cared about others, thought for themselves, and refused to accept that things had to stay the same forever. In a galaxy ruled by ancient species who valued order and tradition above all else, humanity was indeed a threat, but that did not make genocide the right answer. Morrison looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. These people trusted him to keep them safe and make the right decisions. Behind them were the 40 billion humans living across dozens of worlds, all of them going about their daily lives with no idea that their entire species had been marked for death. The weight of that responsibility settled on Morrison's shoulders like a lead blanket. Whatever he did next would determine whether humanity had a future or whether the last humans in the universe would die in 3 weeks, never knowing why. Morrison knew that the intercepted transmission was just the beginning. If the Council was really planning to kill every human in the galaxy, they would need more than just one message to prove it. He called together his most trusted officers for an emergency meeting in the ship's secure briefing room. Chief Intelligence Officer Lisa Hayes arrived first, carrying her portable computer and looking worried. She was a small woman with dark hair who rarely spoke unless she had something important to say. When she did speak, everyone listened because Lisa knew more about alien politics than anyone else. On the ship. Tech specialist Danny Rodriguez came in next, his arms full of equipment that Morrison did not recognize. Danny was the kind of person who could take apart any machine and put it back together better than before. If there were more secrets hidden in the Council's communications, Danny would find them. Pete Sullivan closed the door behind him and activated the room's privacy shields. Now no one could listen to what they were saying, not even their own crew. Morrison played the intercepted transmission again, watching his officers' faces as they heard the plan to destroy humanity. Lisa's expression never changed, but Morrison could see her hands tighten into fists. Danny stopped fiddling with his equipment and sat perfectly still. "We need to know if this is real," Morrison said. "And if it is real, we need to know everything about their plan." Lisa nodded and opened her computer. "I can cross-reference the transmission codes with our intelligence files on Council communication patterns. If this came from where Amy thinks it did, there should be matching signatures in our databases." Danny was already connecting his equipment to the ship's main computer system. "I can try to crack deeper into their network. If there's one message about Operation Cleanse, there are probably dozens more." For the next 6 hours, the 3 officers worked without stopping. Morrison brought them food and coffee while they dug deeper into the conspiracy that threatened to end human civilization. Lisa confirmed that the transmission was definitely real. The encryption patterns, routing codes, and digital signatures all matched the Council's most secure military channels. More importantly, she found evidence that similar messages had been sent to military commanders across the galaxy. "This is not just one rogue general or angry politician," Lisa said. "The orders are coming from the very top of the Council hierarchy. Chancellor Vexthara himself authorized the operation." Danny's work was even more disturbing. By following the digital trails left by the intercepted message, he had managed to hack into a secondary communication network that the Council used for their most secret planning. "Captain, you need to see this," Danny said, bringing up a series of documents on the main screen. The first document was a detailed analysis of human military capabilities. The Council had been studying human warships, weapons, and defensive systems for over 2 years. They knew exactly how many ships humanity had, where those ships were stationed, and what their weaknesses were. The second document was a financial report showing massive transfers of credits to mercenary fleets and weapons dealers. The Council had been quietly building a secret army that could not be traced back to them. The third document made Morrison's blood run cold. It was a scientific report about biological weapons designed specifically to target human DNA. The weapons would spread like a plague, killing only humans while leaving other species completely unharmed. "They've been planning this for years," Pete said, reading over Morrison's shoulder. "This is not some panic reaction to humanity joining the Council. This is a long-term strategy." Lisa found more evidence in the personnel files she had accessed. The Council had placed agents inside human colonies, human military bases, and even human government buildings. These agents had been gathering intelligence and preparing for the attack. "There's an agent named Marcus Webb working in the Earth Defense Command," Lisa said. "According to his file, he's been feeding information about Earth's orbital defenses to his Council handlers for 18 months. Danny discovered that the biological weapons were already in position. Council ships disguised as medical supply vessels had been visiting human colonies for the past year, secretly releasing the weapons into water supplies and air filtration systems. The weapons were designed to remain dormant until activated by a specific radio signal. They could start killing people tomorrow if they wanted to," Danny said. "The weapons are already there, waiting." Morrison felt sick as he realized how completely humanity had been betrayed. Every friendly gesture from the Council, every diplomatic dinner and cultural exchange had been part of an elaborate deception. While humans thought they were building friendships, the Council was preparing for genocide. The most chilling discovery came when Lisa accessed the personal files of Council leaders. She found a memo from Security Director Thane Mordix that explained the Council's thinking. The human species represents chaos in our ordered galaxy, the memo read. Their emotional bonds make them unpredictable in warfare. Their technological innovation exceeds our modeling parameters. Most dangerous of all, their concepts of individual freedom and social equality are spreading to other species. If we allow humanity to continue existing, they will eventually destroy the stability we have spent millennia building. Morrison understood now why the Council wanted humanity dead. It was not about resources or territory or old grudges. It was about fear. The Council's member species had created a galaxy where everything stayed the same, where the strong ruled the weak, and no one questioned the ancient order. Humanity, with its messy emotions and constant changes and refusal to accept that things had to stay the same forever, threatened everything the Council believed in. But the most disturbing part of Mordix's memo came at the end. Biological elimination is preferable to military conquest because it will appear natural. Other species will believe that humanity was destroyed by disease or genetic instability, not by deliberate action. This will prevent martyrdom and reduce the risk of rebellion among sympathetic species. The Council was not just planning to kill every human. They were planning to make it look like an accident so that no one would ever know the truth. Morrison looked at his officers and saw his own determination reflected in their faces. They had uncovered a conspiracy that went to the very heart of galactic civilization. Now they had to decide what to do with that knowledge. How many people know about this? Morrison asked. Just the four of us and Amy, Pete said. I haven't told anyone else on the crew, Morrison nodded. The fewer people who knew, the safer they would all be. But keeping the secret would not save humanity. Somehow, they had to find a way to expose the Council's plan and stop it from happening. We have 2.5 weeks, Morrison said. 2.5 weeks to save our entire species. The weight of that responsibility settled over the room like a heavy blanket. But Morrison also felt something else growing inside him. Anger. The Council thought they could eliminate humanity like some kind of pest, quietly and without consequences. They were about to learn that humans did not go quietly into the dark. Morrison stared at the evidence spread across the briefing room table and knew that keeping the secret would doom humanity. They had to tell someone, but choosing the wrong person could trigger the genocide immediately. The Council would not hesitate to start Operation Cleanse early if they discovered their plan had been exposed. He thought about the alien species he had met during his years in space. Most of them seemed friendly enough, but friendship was different from trust. How could he know which species would stand with humanity and which would betray them to the Council? Lisa Hayes had been thinking about the same problem. She pulled up her files on galactic politics and began sorting through potential allies. The Aquarian Republic might help us, she said. They're a young species like humanity, and they've always been treated poorly by the older Council members. Ambassador. Krellin has worked with our diplomats before and seemed genuinely friendly. Morrison remembered Krellin from a trade meeting 2 years ago. She was tall and blue-skinned with large dark eyes that seemed to see everything. More importantly, she had defended human interests when other species tried to exclude humanity from a profitable mining agreement. What about the others? Morrison asked. Lisa scrolled through more files. The Valyrian Knights value honor above everything else. If we can prove the Council is planning genocide, they might feel obligated to stop it. The Nexus Collective are very logical thinkers who make decisions based on evidence rather than emotion. Danny Rodriguez looked up from his equipment. I can create a secure communication package that will be almost impossible to trace. If we're going to contact these species, we need to make sure the Council can't track the messages back to us. Morrison made his decision. They would start with Ambassador Krellin of the Aquarian Republic. If she betrayed them, at least they would know quickly and could prepare for the worst. Danny spent the next 4 hours building an encrypted communication system that bounced signals through dozens of relay stations across the galaxy. By the time a message reached its destination, even the Council's best trackers would not be able to find its source. Morrison recorded a simple message explaining who he was and asking for a private meeting to discuss a matter of galactic importance. He did not mention the genocide plot in case the message was intercepted. The reply came back within 6 hours. Krellin agreed to meet with Morrison in person at a neutral location, a small trading station called Haven Point that sat on the border between human and Aquarian space. Morrison took a shuttle to Haven Point while Pete Sullivan commanded the Venture. The trading station was exactly the kind of place where beings from different species could meet without attracting attention. Merchants, traders, and travelers from across the galaxy stopped there to buy supplies and exchange information. Krellin was waiting for him in a private meeting room that she had rented for the occasion. She looked exactly as Morrison remembered her, tall and graceful with intelligent eyes that missed nothing. "Captain Morrison," she said in accented but fluent human English. "Your message was very mysterious. What is this galactic importance you wish to discuss?" Morrison activated the room's privacy shields and then played the intercepted transmission for Krellin. He watched her face carefully as she listened to the Council's plan to exterminate humanity. Krellin's blue skin turned pale and her large eyes grew even wider. When the transmission ended, she sat in silence for several minutes, processing what she had heard. "This is not possible," she finally said. "The Council may be arrogant and set in their ways, but they would never commit genocide. There are laws, treaties, moral codes that prevent such actions." Morrison showed her the additional evidence that Danny and Lisa had uncovered: the financial records, the biological weapons data, the placement of sleeper agents, and the personal memo from Security Director Mordix that explained the Council's reasoning. As Krellin examined each piece of evidence, her expression changed, from disbelief to shock to anger. She was particularly disturbed by the biological weapons report. "These weapons would not only kill humans," she said. "The genetic targeting system is too broad. Species with similar DNA structures would also be affected. My people, the Centauri colonies, even some of the newer Council member species could die from these weapons." Morrison had not considered that possibility, but it made sense. The Council was so focused on eliminating humanity that they had not cared about collateral damage to other species. "Will you help us?" Morrison asked Krell and nodded slowly. "The Aquarian Republic cannot stand by while genocide is committed in our galaxy. But we are not strong enough to stop the Council alone. We will need allies." Over the next week, Krellin used her diplomatic contacts to quietly approach other species that might be sympathetic to humanity's situation. She was careful not to reveal too much information in case some of her contacts were loyal to the Council. First positive response came from Commander Thane of the Valyrian Knights. The Valyrians were an honor-bound warrior culture that despised treachery and cowardice. When Thane saw the evidence of the Council's deception, he immediately pledged his support. "The Council has acted without honor," Thane declared during a secret meeting with Morrison and Krellin. "They smile and speak of peace while planning murder in the darkness. This goes against everything the Valyrians believe in." The Nexus Collective was harder to convince because they approached every decision through careful analysis and logical reasoning. Their representative, a machine-like being called Unit 7, spent 3 days examining the evidence before reaching a conclusion. "The probability that this evidence has been fabricated is less than 2%, Unit 7 announced. "The logical response is to prevent the genocide and reform the Council's decision-making processes to prevent similar conspiracies in the future." Word of the conspiracy began spreading through unofficial channels as more species learned the truth. The younger civilizations that had joined the galactic community in recent centuries were particularly outraged. Many of them had faced discrimination from the older council species and could easily imagine themselves being targeted for elimination. Dr. Carol Bennett, humanity's chief xenobiologist working at the Diplomatic Research Station, provided crucial analysis of the biological weapons. Her report confirmed Krellin's fears that the weapons would affect multiple species. The targeting mechanism is designed to attack specific protein chains found in human DNA, Carol explained during a secure video conference. But those same protein chains exist in at least 7 other species. The Council is planning to commit accidental genocide against their own allies. This information convinced several fence-sitting species to join the growing coalition. Nobody wanted to risk being killed by weapons designed to eliminate humans. Morrison found himself at the center of a growing alliance that included dozens of species from across the galaxy. What had started as a desperate attempt to save humanity was becoming something much larger, a movement to reform the entire galactic order. A time was running out. They had less than a week before Operation Cleanse was scheduled to begin, and the Council still controlled the most powerful military forces in the galaxy. The real test would come when they confronted the Council directly and demanded justice for crimes that had not yet been committed. News of the conspiracy spread faster than Morrison had expected. Within 3 days, species across the galaxy were demanding explanations from their council representatives. Chancellor Vexthara found himself facing the worst political crisis in galactic history as his carefully planned genocide became an open secret. Morrison received an urgent message from Admiral Tony Walsh, the commander of humanity's defensive fleet. Walsh had been quietly mobilizing human forces after receiving a coded warning from Morrison, but he was confused about what threat they were preparing to face. "Captain Morrison, I need to know what's happening out there," Walsh said during their secure communication. "Half the galaxy is talking about some kind of council conspiracy, and the other half is mobilizing their fleets. Are we at war?" Morrison explained everything to Walsh, from the intercepted transmission to the growing coalition of allied species. Walsh listened in silence, his weathered face growing darker with each revelation. "How do you want to handle this?" Walsh asked when Morrison finished. "We position our fleets defensively around human colonies, but we don't attack anyone," Morrison said. "We want justice, not revenge. If we start shooting first, we become the aggressors and lose the moral high ground." Walsh nodded and began issuing orders to his fleet commanders. Human warships moved to protect Earth, Mars, and the outer colonies, but they broadcast messages of peaceful intent to anyone who would listen. Meanwhile, Ambassador Kate Lawson was having her own crisis at the Council headquarters on Nexus Prime. She had been humanity's representative to the galactic government for 2 years and thought she understood how council politics worked. Revelation that her colleagues had been planning to murder her entire species while smiling at her across negotiation tables left her feeling sick and angry. Kate demanded an emergency session of the full council to address the conspiracy accusations. Chancellor Vexthara tried to refuse, claiming that the charges were based on fabricated evidence and terrorist propaganda. But the growing coalition of allied species forced his hand by threatening to withdraw from the council entirely if the session was not held. The emergency session was scheduled for 3 days later, just 2 days before Operation Cleanse was supposed to begin. Kate spent those 3 days preparing the most important presentation of her life, knowing that the survival of humanity depended on her ability to convince the galaxy that the conspiracy was real. Morrison and his allies worked frantically to gather more evidence. Danny Rodriguez had managed to hack into additional council communication networks and found proof that biological weapons had already been deployed to human colonies. The weapons were sitting dormant in water treatment facilities and air recycling systems, waiting for the activation signal. Dr. Carol Bennett's analysis became even more disturbing when she discovered that the biological weapons were designed to activate automatically if they were not deactivated within a specific time frame. If something happened to the Council's command structure, the weapons would release themselves and begin killing everyone they were designed to target. "It's a dead man's switch," Carol explained during an emergency conference with Morrison and the allied species representatives. "If the conspiracy is exposed and the Council leaders are arrested, the weapons will activate anyway. We need to find a way to disable them before we make our accusations public." Lisa Hayes had been working on that exact problem. She had identified the locations of the biological weapons on 17 human colonies and mapped out the communication networks the Council was using to control them. The weapons could be disabled, but it would require coordinated action across multiple star systems. Commander Thane of the Valyrian Knights volunteered his forces to help with the disarmament operation. The Valyrians were known for their precision and discipline, exactly the qualities needed for such a delicate mission. "My warriors will not let innocent people die because of Council treachery," Thane declared. "We will disable these weapons while you confront the conspirators." The night before the Council session, Morrison could not sleep. He stood on the observation deck of the Venture, looking out at the stars and thinking about how much had changed in just 2 weeks. Humanity had gone from being a welcomed member of the galactic community to fighting for its very existence. Amy Carter joined him on the observation deck. She had been working almost non-stop since intercepting the original transmission, and she looked exhausted. "Do you think it will work?" she asked. Morrison did not have a good answer. Their plan was complicated and dangerous, with dozens of things that could go wrong. If Kate could not convince the Council that the conspiracy was real, or if the Valyrians failed to disable the biological weapons, or if Vexthara decided to start Operation Cleanse early, humanity could be extinct within days. "I think we have to try," Morrison said. "The alternative is accepting that our entire species will be murdered by people we trusted." The day of the Council session arrived with news that made everything more urgent. Scouts reported that Council military forces were moving toward human space, positioning themselves for what looked like a coordinated attack. Operation Cleanse was beginning ahead of schedule. Kate Lawson walked into the Council chamber, knowing that she was probably looking at the faces of people who wanted to kill every human in the galaxy. The chamber was packed with representatives from over 100 species, many of whom had never heard the full details of the conspiracy. Chancellor Vexthara called the session to order and immediately tried to control the narrative. He claimed that the accusations against the Council were based on fabricated evidence provided by human terrorists who wanted to destabilize galactic peace. "The human species has shown its true nature," Vexthara declared. "They spread lies and conspiracy theories when they do not get their way. This is exactly why they cannot be trusted with full membership in our galactic community." Kate stood up and activated the chamber's main display screen. She had spent days organizing the evidence into a presentation that even the most skeptical observer could not dismiss. The first piece of evidence was the intercepted transmission that Morrison had discovered. The Council chamber fell silent as Vexthara's own voice filled the air, discussing the details of Operation Cleanse and the planned extermination of humanity. Several Council members tried to claim that the transmission was fake, but Kate was ready for that objection. She showed the technical analysis that Lisa Hayes had performed, proving that the transmission had come from the Council's own secure networks. The second piece of evidence was the financial records showing massive payments to mercenary fleets and weapons dealers. Kate displayed the banking codes and transaction records that proved the Council had been secretly building an army to carry out the genocide. The third piece of evidence was the biological weapons report that Dr. Carol Bennett had analyzed. Kate explained how the weapons worked and showed the projected casualty figures, not just for humans, but for all the other species that would be accidentally killed. The chamber erupted in chaos as representatives realized that their own people could die from weapons designed to kill humans. Species that had been neutral or even supportive of the Council suddenly found themselves potential victims of the conspiracy. But the most damning evidence came last. Kate played the personal memo from Security Director Thane Mornix, the one that explained the Council's reasoning for planning genocide. As Mornix's words filled the chamber, describing humanity as a threat to galactic order that needed to be eliminated, even the Council's most loyal supporters could not deny what they were hearing. The conspiracy was real, it was extensive, and it was happening right now. The silence in the Council chamber stretched for long minutes after Kate Lawson finished presenting the evidence. Representatives from dozens of species stared at Chancellor Vexthara and the other accused Council leaders, waiting for some kind of explanation that could make sense of what they had just heard. Vexthara tried one last desperate attempt to control the situation. He stood up and pointed an accusing finger at Kate. "This is all fabricated propaganda designed to turn the galaxy against its rightful leaders," he declared. "The humans have created these false documents to justify their own aggressive expansion into Council territory." But his words fell flat in the face of overwhelming evidence. Too many species had verified the authenticity of the intercepted transmissions. Too many banking records showed payments to mercenary fleets. Too many scientists had confirmed that the biological weapons were real and already deployed. Ambassador Krellin of the Aquarian Republic stood up next. Her blue skin had turned pale with anger as she addressed the chamber. "I have personally verified every piece of evidence presented here today," she said. "The transmission codes match Council security protocols. The financial records are genuine. The biological weapons exist and are currently active on human colonies. Chancellor Vexthara and his conspirators have planned the complete extermination of an entire species while pretending to welcome them into our community." Commander Thane of the Valyrian Knights rose from his seat with his hand resting on his ceremonial sword. The Valyrians took honor very seriously, and what the Council had done violated every principle they believed in. "The Council has acted without honor," Thane declared. "They have planned murder while speaking of peace. They have betrayed trust while demanding loyalty. By Valyrian law, they have forfeited any right to lead." Unit 7 of the Nexus Collective added its own analysis in the flat mechanical voice that its species used for important announcements. Probability of Council conspiracy being genuine, 97.4%. Logical conclusion: current Council leadership is unfit for continued governance. Recommendation: immediate removal and criminal prosecution of all involved parties. One by one, representatives from across the galaxy stood up to condemn the conspiracy. Species that had never questioned Council authority were now demanding justice for attempted genocide. The carefully maintained order that had ruled the galaxy for centuries was collapsing in real time. General Vexter of the Corvin Collective, one of the main conspirators, tried to defend their actions by claiming that humanity really was a threat to galactic stability. "Look at how quickly they reproduce and spread across new worlds," he said. "Look at how their technology advances faster than our ability to control it. Look at how their ideas about freedom and equality are spreading to other species. If we had not acted, they would have eventually destroyed everything we have built." His words only made things worse. Representatives from younger species realized that they could be the next targets if the Council decided they were growing too quickly or thinking too independently. Kate Lawson stood up to respond to Vexter's justification. Her voice was calm, but filled with quiet strength that commanded the attention of the entire chamber. "General Vexter has just admitted that the Council planned genocide because humanity refuses to accept that things must always stay the same. She said, "We are guilty of believing that all species deserve freedom and dignity. We are guilty of sharing our technology instead of hoarding it. We are guilty of forming friendships with others instead of ruling over them. If these are crimes worthy of extinction, then this galaxy is not worth saving." Her words hit the chamber like a physical blow. Many species represented in that room had benefited from human technology sharing and cultural exchange. They had seen firsthand that humanity's approach to galactic relations was based on cooperation rather than domination. Chancellor Vexthara made one final desperate move. He activated his personal communicator and tried to send the signal that would release the biological weapons immediately. If he was going down, he would take humanity with him. But Danny Rodriguez had been monitoring Council communications from the Venture. The moment Vexthara tried to send the activation signal, Danny blocked it with a jamming burst that he had prepared for exactly this situation. At the same time, Valyrian strike teams were moving through human colonies, locating and disabling the biological weapons before they could activate. Commander Thane had positioned his warriors perfectly, and their military precision allowed them to neutralize the weapons within minutes of each other. The chamber erupted in chaos as Vexthara realized his final plan had failed. Security forces moved to arrest him and the other conspirators, but several council species tried to protect them. For a few terrifying minutes, it looked like the session might turn into an armed battle. Ambassador Krellin restored order by calling for an immediate vote of no confidence in the current council leadership. The vote was not even close. 87 species voted to remove Vexthara and his allies from power. Only 12 species voted to support them, and most of those abstained. Rather than actively defending genocide, the aftermath moved quickly. Vexthara, Vexter, Security Director Mordix, and 14 other high-ranking council officials were arrested and charged with conspiracy to commit genocide. The evidence against them was so overwhelming that even their own species representatives refused to defend them. But the real change came in how the galaxy would be governed going forward. The old council system, where a few ancient species made all the decisions, was finished. Representatives from across the galaxy demanded a new system with equal representation for all member species, regardless of how long they had been part of. The galactic community. Kate Lawson found herself elected as the first chairwoman of the new Galactic Democratic Assembly. Her first act was to establish the Galactic Justice Commission, an independent body that would investigate and prevent future conspiracies. Captain Morrison and his crew received the highest honors that the galaxy could give. The USS Venture became a symbol of courage and integrity, proof that doing the right thing was more important than following orders or staying safe. Admiral Walsh repositioned the human fleet from defensive positions to partnership roles, working with former enemies to build a new kind of galactic security force based on cooperation rather than domination. Dr. Carol Bennett led the effort to develop detection systems that would prevent biological weapons from ever being deployed secretly again. Her work saved countless lives and earned humanity even more respect from species that had once feared them. The memorial ceremony took place 6 months later on New Geneva Station, a new facility built specifically to house the Democratic Assembly. Representatives from over 200 species gathered to honor not just humanity's survival, but the galaxy's commitment to justice over fear. Morrison stood before the memorial wall and read the inscription that had been carved there in dozens of languages. When darkness threatened to consume the light of civilization, courage and truth proved stronger than conspiracy and hate. The galaxy had learned something important from the crisis. Diversity and change were not threats to be eliminated, but strengths to be celebrated and protected. The Council's attempt to destroy humanity had instead created a stronger, more united galactic community than had ever existed before. As Morrison looked out at the representatives from hundreds of different worlds, all working together to build a better future, he realized that humanity had not just survived. They had helped the galaxy become something worth surviving for.